At 5:12 in the morning on April 18, 1906, the ground under San Francisco began to move. The shaking lasted less than a minute, but it tore streets, cracked walls, twisted rails, broke gas lines, and shattered water mains. People ran from bedrooms into a city that no longer felt solid. Yet the earthquake was only the beginning. In the hours that followed, fires started across the damaged city. With water systems broken and streets blocked by debris, flames spread through neighborhoods. The disaster became famous because fire finished what the earthquake had started.
The source was the San Andreas Fault, a vast boundary where sections of the Earth's crust move past each other. In 1906, a long segment ruptured across Northern California. Fences, roads, and fields were offset by the sudden movement. The quake was felt far beyond San Francisco, but the city's dense buildings, filled land, gas infrastructure, and crowded streets made it especially vulnerable. Science at the time was still developing language for faults, seismic waves, and ground failure. Residents knew the Earth had shaken. Researchers would spend years learning exactly how the ground had broken.
San Francisco before the quake was a booming port city, wealthy, restless, and proud of its modern energy. Brick buildings, hotels, theaters, warehouses, cable cars, and crowded wooden neighborhoods stood close together. Some structures were strong, but many were not prepared for violent horizontal motion. Unenforced masonry collapsed, chimneys fell through roofs, cornices dropped into streets. On filled ground near the bay, the soil behaved badly and amplified damage. A modern city had grown on a seismic landscape without fully understanding the bargain it had made. Fire became the central catastrophe because the earthquake attacked the tools needed to fight it. Broken gas lines ignited. Stoves, lamps, and electrical faults started blazes. Firefighters discovered that many hydrants were useless because mains had ruptured. Cisterns helped in some places, but not enough. The flames moved from building to building, feeding on timber, interiors, warehouses, and wind. People watched firefighters battle with courage, but too little water. In disaster history, that detail matters. The deadliest force was not only nature, but the failure of urban systems after nature struck. Authorities tried desperate measures. Soldiers and officials used dynamite to create fire breaks, hoping that destroying buildings ahead of the flames would stop the spread. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes explosions started new fires or added chaos to streets already filled with smoke, refugees, and broken masonry. The decision has been debated for more than a century because it shows how emergencies force choices with incomplete information. A city can look organized on paper, but disaster compresses time until leaders gamble with whole blocks. Thousands of people fled with whatever they could carry. Photographs show families pulling trunks, bedding, and children through streets lined with ruins. Parks, military reservations, and open spaces became refugee camps. Tents and temporary cottages filled the Presidio, Golden Gate Park, and other areas. For many survivors, the disaster was not one morning, but months of displacement, hunger, paperwork, disease fears, and uncertainty. The familiar city had become a landscape of chimneys, ash, relief lines, and improvised shelter.
The official death toll was long understated. Early numbers were shaped by politics, reputation, and the desire to present San Francisco as a city ready to rebuild. Modern researchers believe the true number of deaths was far higher than the old official count. Some victims were buried quickly. Some records were lost. Some communities were ignored. Disasters often produce a second struggle over memory. Who is counted? Who is named? And who disappears into statistics? The 1906 catastrophe is not only about buildings destroyed, but about lives that were incompletely recorded.
Insurance became another battleground. Many policies covered fire, but not earthquake damage. That distinction mattered enormously when a building had been shaken, then burned. Companies, owners, lawyers, and officials argued over cause. Some insurers paid, others resisted or failed. The financial consequences shaped rebuilding and business survival. A disaster is never only physical. It moves through contracts, banks, courts, and balance sheets. The ruins of San Francisco were also an argument over responsibility, written in smoke and paperwork. Rebuilding began almost immediately. The city cleared debris, restored services, and promoted confidence. Temporary buildings rose, streets reopened, businesses returned. San Francisco wanted the world to see resilience, not abandonment. But speed had costs. Reformers proposed grand redesigns and safer planning, while economic pressure pushed the city to rebuild fast on familiar patterns. The result was a mixture of improvement and repetition. The city rose again, but not as a perfect lesson learned. Like many places after catastrophe, it rebuilt under the pressure of memory, money, pride, and urgency.
The earthquake transformed science. The Lawson Report, published after detailed investigation, documented fault rupture, ground displacement, building damage, and seismic effects. It became a landmark in earthquake research. Photographs of offset fences and roads help show that earthquakes were linked to sudden movement along faults. The disaster therefore gave scientists tragic evidence. Modern seismology, hazard mapping, and building codes owe part of their development to what happened in 1906. Knowledge advanced because the city had paid a terrible price.
The disaster also changed how people think about cities. San Francisco showed that urban risk is layered. Geology matters, but so do construction choices, water systems, firefighting capacity, emergency command, poverty, communications, and public honesty. The same earthquake in an empty field would be remembered differently. In a city, shaking becomes fire, fire becomes displacement, displacement becomes politics, and politics becomes memory. The 1906 event is powerful because it reveals the hidden connections that keep a city alive until one of them snaps.
Today, San Francisco lives with the same larger reality. The earth beneath California still moves. Buildings are stronger, science is better, and emergency planning is more advanced, but risk has not vanished. The lesson of 1906 is not simply that earthquakes happen. It is that the aftermath can become the greater disaster if systems fail together. The fire that finished with the earthquake started remains a warning in every skyline built near a fault. A city is more than its buildings. It is water, trust, memory, preparation, and the fragile belief that morning will arrive on stable ground.
The photographs of 1906 can make the disaster seem distant because the clothes, wagons, streetcars, and hotel fronts belong to another century. But the pattern is modern. Dense cities still depend on networks that can break together. A rupture in one system can cascade into another. A blocked road can delay rescue. A broken pipe can feed a fire. A rumor can become policy before facts arrive. Looking at San Francisco's ruins is therefore not nostalgia. It is a rehearsal for thinking about urban fragility. The fire also exposed inequality. Wealthier residents had resources, connections, and options that poor residents often lacked. Chinese immigrants in Chinatown faced discrimination before, during, and after the disaster, including political efforts to relocate their community away from valuable land. Relief was never just relief. It was shaped by power. Who received help, who was blamed, and who was allowed to return all mattered. Catastrophe can briefly make everyone vulnerable, but recovery often reveals the old hierarchy in sharper form. What makes 1906 unforgettable is the combination of speed and duration. The earthquake happened in seconds. The fires burned for days. Rebuilding took years. Scientific meaning unfolded over decades. That layered timeline is typical of great disasters. The moment of impact receives the headline, but the deeper story lives in the aftermath, how officials tell the story, how residents survive, how engineers change rules, and how a city decides whether memory will become preparation or simply fade into myth.